Odd encounter. I'm a 21-year-old male. This isn't particularly creepy, but I've got nowhere else to post this. So I live with my parents in a small apartment building, and this happened a few months back. Somebody rang the doorbell and waited at the door. I used the peephole to check who it was, and I couldn't recognize the person. Looked like a junkie or some movie extra that gets 3 seconds of screen time by being beat down by Steven Seagal or something like that. I asked, "Who is it?" And we responded with, "It's me." And he got unusually close to the door. Not to rule that I might have been paranoid, but it seemed like he was getting ready to force himself inside as soon as I opened the door. Like maybe jam the door with a foot or barge inside. I asked him, "Who are you?" The gentleman got kind of angry, because apparently I had the chutzpah to ask who's at my door. "It's me! Who the fuck are you?" he replied. I told him to fuck off, and then I went away. Now comes the mildly creepy part. I went off, didn't make much of the situation, and I'd estimate a good 5 minutes had passed. I walked into the room with my mom, and she asked me who it was, and I told her what happened, and that it's probably a junkie or something. She thought I might have mistaken him for my older brother, and she went to answer the door. The dude was still there, staring angrily into the peephole. My mom told him to fuck off and go back to where he came from. Another 1 and 2 minutes passed, and I checked if he was still there. He was. Wow. At that point, I was getting ready to call the police, but by the time I found the phone, and all I decided to check on one last time, he was gone. I think he stood there for a good 10 minutes after I told him to fuck off. My mom told me it was a good thing that I answered the door because she always opens without checking first. What do you think? Did someone switch up some addresses? Was it a burglar or something? Anyways, let's not meet, I guess. The doorbell incident. I'll try to keep this story brief. Back in October of last year, I'd experienced something that I found creepy and unsettling. My wife had left town for a couple weeks, so I was alone during that time. We lived in a decent neighborhood, but Phoenix is kind of weird in that you can be in a really nice neighborhood, then if you travel a couple streets down, you'd be in a not so great neighborhood. Our house is right on the edge of a good and bad area. Our place was kind of tucked back at the base of a mountain, out of sight, out of mind. Our street didn't have any streetlights at this point. The HOA installed them a couple months later due to complaints, so it was always dark at night. One day, I was sitting up in my room on the second floor, and the doorbell kept ringing like crazy, maybe in like 1-second intervals, sometimes rapid fire. This went on for about 10 to 15 minutes straight. This was very unsettling for it to go on that long, but it was daylight out, and for some reason things aren't as scary. I honestly didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. I peeked out my curtains to see if I could see the people. My room is right above the front door. I was careful not to move the curtains too much because I didn't want them to see me peeking out. I saw a man and a woman I did not recognize, dressed wearing loose, ratty clothes. There was no reason for these strange people to be aggressively ringing my doorbell nonstop for so long. I didn't know what to do. I was freaked out because I guess you could say that I could be considered a target due to my LGBT status, so I decided to send some friends a Snapchat of what was going on to let them know that some freaky stuff was going on. People kept telling me to call the police, but I felt weird doing that just because someone is ringing my doorbell. Eventually, the people went away and that was that, or so I thought. When my neighbor came home, I let her know what happened. She told me that if anything like that ever happened again, to give her a call, and she'd have her boyfriend come over and see what was going on. He's huge and works at a gym, so he looks very intimidating. I already had her number, so I didn't need to ask for it. All was good. Fast forward to later that night at around midnight. I was sitting on the couch in just my underwear watching the TV. My dogs were being annoying with their barking, so I shut them in the room upstairs and turned up my TV, so that I wouldn't have to deal with it. My couch is facing the wall, where the front door and the windows are, because the only space to put our TV was above the fireplace. The window by the stairs didn't have a curtain up, because it had fallen at some point, and I never got around to putting it back up. I wasn't really worried about it because I was tucked in a corner, and you wouldn't be able to see it unless you were right up against it. That combined with how secluded our neighborhood was, I wasn't worried about hanging out at home in my underwear, with a window uncovered. Midnight rolls around, and my doorbell starts going off again, this time more crazy. Not knowing if somebody is or was peeking in at me, I book it straight towards the tiny first-floor bathroom and lock the door. Meanwhile, my dogs are still stuck in the room upstairs. I tried calling my neighbor, but I no longer had her number. I guess it didn't transfer over when I replaced my phone, so I called the police, and they said that they'd be sending someone. In the meantime, I'm locked in this tiny bathroom. The TV is blasting, and the doorbell has been going off for several minutes. I had no idea or no way to protect myself if anyone broke inside, because I didn't grab anything. I just bolted to the bathroom, and that was all I did. It's midnight. Nobody with a legitimate reason would be at my front door at midnight. At this point, it had been going on for about 8 minutes or so, when I decided to record it once again. This time, longer. I tried to get better audio by cracking the door open a little, since my TV was so freaking loud, ready to slam the door closed if I heard anyone. But at that point, the ringing just stopped. Turns out my neighbor woke up and heard the bells as well, so they went out to investigate and confront the people, and said the people just booked it. They described the same 2 people I had seen earlier. 30 minutes later, the police finally arrived. I gave them my statement, and that was that. It never happened again after that. I moved a couple of months later for unrelated reasons. We can hear you in there. When I was young, I was homesick a lot with various chronic illnesses. It meant I got to watch a lot of TV, so that was good because yay, TV. But it also meant I was home alone by myself a lot. My mom couldn't miss work due to being our only provider. Once, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, it was a particularly awful health day, and I was crashed out on the couch in the living room. It was around 8 a.m., as I just heard my brother's school bus drive off. Now, as I was basically a latchkey kid, we had a set of rules about things for when my mom wasn't home. Things like if strangers call looking for mom, she's in the shower, no leaving the house when she wasn't home, and the one important to my story. If someone knocked when we weren't expecting anyone, we were supposed to not acknowledge it. This might sound a bit silly, but I was a sickly kid by myself. And so, I eagerly followed the rules. So, I was watching something on TV when the doorbell started ringing. Once at first, but when I didn't acknowledge it, they started leaning on it. Then the pounding on the door. I'd ignored it still, but was understandably a little shaken. A few minutes of quiet followed, and then it started again. This time on the front and back door. They repeatedly tried each doorknob, trying to get in. I was freaking out, too scared to move. Suddenly, a loud, shrill female voice yelled, "We can hear you in there. We just want to talk to you about the Lord." Wait, what? At this point, my next-door neighbor, who was also home dealing with chemo sickness, came out of his apartment and chased him off. I yelled to him that there was one at the back door too, but I guess they heard me and ran off too. He knocked and I let him in. In front of my door was a drop pile of religious pamphlets. He made sure I was okay, and I spent the rest of the day at their place until Mom came home. I'm really grateful he was there. As for the why, I don't know. It was apparently 2 very devout women in the area who had harassed people a number of times, but I couldn't begin to explain why. That was their method of attempted conversion. I seriously doubt they would have caused me any harm, but this remains one of the most bizarre moments of my life. Crazy babysitter. I don't even know where to start this story. I was kind of young at the time, around 7 or 8 years old, but old enough to know what was going on. I lived in a pretty decent neighborhood, but my family was in the process of moving. There was a large mixture of families with children and retired seniors living on my street. There was a neighborhood babysitter who took care of my younger sister when she was too young to go to school. She also happened to babysit me on multiple occasions. She was always kind of rude, a pudgy lady with 2 annoying sons and a very weird husband. A lot of kids got taken care of by her, so my parents trusted her to take care of us. Everything was somewhat normal, I guess, except for the fact that she was kind of rude to anybody that wasn't her kid. Her kids were pretty misbehaved. They were always fighting, hitting each other with plastic swords, and screaming at the top of their lungs. At one point, the younger toddlers had a nap and she forced all of the children to sit in a corner and be quiet, besides her kids. Odd behavior for a babysitter, but we never thought much about it. Another thing to mention is that she took naps while babysitting, as in, she didn't pay attention to the kids. She just shooed them away and fell asleep. She was also notorious for giving her sons chocolate milk and telling others they had to have water. My sister and I tried to ignore it, but eventually we were kind of annoyed by it. My sister had a loud mouth, so she told my mom about how she treats the kids she babysits versus her own children. I'd also like to acknowledge that my sister had just turned 4 years old, so she wasn't great with words. My mom was angry that the babysitter did that, but let it slide, as we were moving in a month and she didn't know if we were being completely honest about the whole entire situation. The house we moved into is the house I spent a large majority of my childhood and teen years in. Things were normal once we transferred into the new house. Until we got the calls. We changed our phone numbers, so we weren't sure how the babysitter and her husband found it so quickly. She called every day, saying that we needed to pay her and that we owed her money. She was just angry that we had moved and were currently on the lookout for a babysitter that was closer to home. My parents received these calls every day, every single frickin' day, and they consisted of a babysitter or her husband screaming, which meant that I could hear the voicemails and calls quite clearly myself. They kept harassing us, and my parents grew agitated and worried. It all ended one night at around 10 p.m. when my sister and I woke up to the sound of ringing of our front door. It was ringing doorbells until it turned into banging. It continued for a good 10 minutes, and it was very, very loud. My sister was so freaked out, so I decided to go see if my parents were awake. They were. They were just opening their eyes, kind of confused as to what in the world was going on. My dad told my mom to stay upstairs, and he foolishly went downstairs to get the door. As I stood at the railing nervously, my sister stayed in the bedroom because she was unaware as to what was actually happening. When he opened the door, I felt sick and terrified. There was my babysitter and her husband, who managed to find not only our address, but also our phone number as well. The husband starts screaming at the top of his lungs, yelling, "You owe us money, pay us," and shaking a knife. Yes, he had a knife in his hand. My dad told him that we didn't and warned him to leave, unless he wanted the cops to be called. He didn't care. My dad wanted to close the door, but he stuck his foot in it, attempting to get inside. My babysitter was also yelling, but I couldn't quite hear what she was saying. We had a phone upstairs, so my mother quietly called the cops, as my dad struggled to get the door closed. Once he did, the banging and screaming continued. They would not leave our property. I was freaked out, so I started crying. My sister saw me crying, and she did the same. Long story short, about an hour later they left, and the cops arrived, having just missed them. My parents knew their information, based on the fact that they actually babysat us, so it wasn't hard to track them down, and they were promptly arrested. I always wondered if their children were home alone or at a sleepover, especially at a time so late. Regardless, they were released a few days later, but were not allowed to step foot near our house. I'm not sure if the woman still babysits, but if she does, I feel terrible for the kids. We never really knew what their intentions were that night. My dad saw the knife and knew they were up to no good. All I can say is, psychotic babysitter and her husband, let's not meet ever again.